By the time they turn 5, the average child has 1,000 photos of themselves online. A new study has found 97% of mums who use Facebook post photos of their kids and almost half post videos. Now, this comes with some dangers, and our parenting expert Claire Orange is here to explain it all. Hi there, Claire.
Afternoon, Emmy.
Now, what's the problem with posting these photos and videos online?
Well, I think the dangers are immense and not to be underestimated. And I think despite the positives associated with sharing our children's lives, you know, there's immediate and long-term dangers to our children that we really need to understand. You know, immediately we've got images out there of our children, and it's not to be underestimated, the trafficking of children's images over the globe. It's scary. And long-term, you know, what are we doing to our children's futures? How are we writing them before they've even begun?
I'll get to the long-term aspect, but I just want to talk about, by doing this as parents, are we failing to protect our kids' right to privacy?
Yeah, we are. I think, you know, I'm sure there's images of you, and I know there's images of me that I don't want online, and yet we do it to our children without their consent, and that's the big word.
Okay, you talk about consent. Should we be asking this from them?
Well, I'm not sure your 4-year-old is able to give informed consent, knowing that, you know, when I'm 22, this can affect me.
Now, is this generation of kids going to be potentially held back then? If we talk about, you know, in the future, are they going to be held back by the ghosts of their past, these embarrassing pics that can still be found on Facebook years later when they're 21, 22?
Yeah, and I think, you know, we have to understand as well that there's stockpiling of information, there's harvesting of information around our children, and it's done at a government-based level, it's done in private industry as well. There's harvesting of information, and it's not the embarrassment factor, it's the damage factor later on. And just because it falls off your Facebook feed, even if you close your Facebook down, it's still there, it's still being stockpiled. So for a long time into our children's futures, we could be changing their outcomes significantly.
So you're saying this could be potentially career limiting?
Yeah, absolutely. And our new research tells us that's where employers start to look to see what profile you've got is on social media.
So what's some advice for parents? How can we limit the fallout from oversharing on the internet?
There's probably the simplest advice is don't overshare on the internet. Don't be part of this sharenting revolution where we have to share images of our children, and sometimes by default images of other people's children, like at assemblies and sports days, where they might not give their consent to have their child up there. And I think as parents, we have to ask ourselves, why are we sharing it? Is it for immediate gratification to get the news out there, or are we doing it to connect our children to significant others, to help them grow and have this lovely net of people around them? And if that is the case, if that's why you share, then find safe ways to do it. And if parents don't know what they are, there's plenty of information on Google about safe sharing of images, so find that out. So, you know, parents also need to be checking their own privacy settings, Emmy. You know, the default is sit on an open setting in Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and unless you change it, but that doesn't mean that your friend settings are the same. You're limited by the lowest common denominator of settings in social media when you put images out there.
Certainly an eye-opening topic. Claire Orange, thanks very much for the advice this afternoon.
Thank you, Emmy.